Welcome. My name is Fred Sandoval. I'm the Executive Director for the National Latino Behavioral Health Association, NALBA for short. Thank you for joining us today for our Plática called Tenemos Voz, which means we have a voice on Latino peer recovery. With me today is our esteemed co-host, La Melissa Montaño, with the Office of Peer Recovery and Engagement. She'll be introducing herself shortly, and we look forward to having her co-host this particular Plática. There's just a lot of excitement in the air right now about today's show, so we'll also be introducing our speaker here momentarily. NALBA is a nonprofit agency dedicated to the well-being of Latinos, individuals, families, communities in New Mexico, and also across the United States. Our mission is to address the disparities and barriers affecting the behavioral health of Latinos. Today, we're excited to present our Plática series called Tenemos Voz on Latino peer recovery and the journey of hope and transformation. Plática is the Spanish word for conversation. Today, we highlight the work of our guest speaker, the esteemed Dr. Jesse Rocky Romero, and his experience in working with individuals here in New Mexico and across the nation, and particularly for those who have enjoyed the benefits and the benefits of recovery. NALBA would like to thank the New Mexico Human Services Department and the Office of Peer Recovery and Engagement for making this series possible. Each month, we plan to host this Plática, and we will have a certain number of co-presenters and co-hosts, but we're just excited that Melissa is here today from the Human Services Department to help host today's show. NALBA, of course, is very concerned about what happens when we're trying to ensure people have access to services. And today we get to talk about that, and we're going to look forward to the live Facebook audience chiming in, asking questions of our presenter, and also to share your thoughts and share your comments. And we'll be sure to share those with our presenter and my co-host as well. So thank you very much for joining us for this series. So let's begin with Melissa Montaño. We're going to ask her to introduce herself. And after she introduces herself, and she can say a little something more about the Office of Peer Recovery and Engagement, because they do some phenomenal work, and all of us should be very proud of that work. But more importantly, after she makes that introduction, I think she and I can do a little mini introduction of our colleague, Dr. Romero, and then we're going to get started with our questions. And again, I want to encourage the Facebook Live audience to send in their questions on the chat, and we're really excited for today's show. So with that, let's get started. Melissa, please introduce yourself and say a little bit more about the Office of Peer Recovery and Engagement.
Thank you. Thanks, Fred, and welcome, Dr. Rocky Romero. Oh my gosh, I'm psyched for this Plática today. I've been looking forward to it. Hi, family out there in Facebook world. My name is Melissa Montaño. I am the Office of Peer Recovery and Engagement Program Manager. I'm a CPSW on fire. I am a woman in long-term recovery. I am employable. I get to sit with giants like these two gentlemen today, and also at the Office of Peer Recovery and Engagement. It's a we thing, and the team that I get to be part of is just it's just amazing. And right now, as we speak, we're tying up another training, Fred, before the holidays. And actually, right now there's not a wait list. So when we get back from all the holidays, from the two holidays, we're going to we're right on track. And January 2023 is going to be an amazing year for OPRE, for peers in recovery, for people with resources out there, for our nonprofits doing amazing work, our wellness centers, our trainings. You know, I remember Dr. Romero really quick before pre-COVID. He came into the office. There was just me, Nathan, and Dr. Romero planning a cultural humility training, and he just pulled through with that, you know. And we did those trainings, and I'm just honored and blessed to be here with all of you. So thank you. I'm excited to hear Dr. Romero.
Super. Well, I guess we probably need to get to his introductions here quickly and then let him say a little bit more about himself. And you're absolutely right, Melissa. I think it's really a reflection of the pride and the knowledge and the expertise that we have here in New Mexico. And this show pays particular credence to that, ¿verdad? We honor the people who we invite to our Pláticas, and it makes it possible for our communities to learn more about not just recovery, but other resources available to them. And so we have a resource with us today who's very intimately familiar with our communities across the state. And I recall meeting Dr. Romero when he was running the program in Albuquerque that was part of New Mexico Highlands University at the time, and very much involved in a treatment program that was helping many individuals who were involved with the criminal justice system or involved with the treatment system. And, those are the early beginnings of some of our work together, but he has a long history in working here in New Mexico and the communities, and his heart and passion for working for la gente, as I would say, is so important, because part of that is that as professionals, we don't want to lose sight of the communities where we come from. We ourselves have our families in recovery. Many of us ourselves are really the outcome of many circumstances that adversely impacted our lives, but we also have recovered from it, or we've gone on to make good accomplishments possible for ourselves, our families, our neighbors, our communities, and our states. So with that, we're going to ask Dr. Rocky Romero to introduce himself, say a little bit more about himself, and he's a pretty humble guy. So if he says too little, we'll poke him and prod him to say a little bit more, Alicia. So with that, over to you, Dr. Romero. And I know you oftentimes say not to call you Dr. Romero, but you tell us what you want us to call you, and we'll call you that.
Awesome. Thank you, Fred. And as always, Rocky is more than enough. I just can't express enough the pride and joy that I'm feeling right now to be part of this Plática, and I'm very lucky to have been a part of a couple before this as well. Alicia and Fred, thank you for the invitation, but more importantly, thank you for the work that both of you do in the community to bring voice to our communities and to really acknowledge the fact that the work is being done by us, for us, right? I think a lot of times we tend to see beyond the work that are being done from community for community. And I think that's an important piece that you guys acknowledge and bring through in terms of these Pláticas. For me, I can't express enough the pride that I bring every time I get introduced as a native son of New Mexico. I think that with all the travels that I've done, and I've been blessed to be involved in a lot of national kind of work, the fact of the matter is that at the end of the day, if we can't make that work available for our people here in our state, then what is it all for, right? So I try to really make sure that as much as the national lens is important to me, that here locally, we really focus on the issues and we stay connected and we wait for our calling, right? We wait for our time to get called up to do this work. And for me, it all started, I think I shared this the last Plática. It started as a community health worker. It started as many times in the roles that you guys are in. So I'll kind of leave the introduction there. I'm very excited with the work that J.R. Romero and Associates, my small local company that I started almost 21 years ago, is involved in at this time, that I'll kind of get into as we start the Plática. But I got to give a shout out to Española, my hometown. Proud to be from the Valley and from northern New Mexico, Rio Arriba County. And here we come. We're going to be involved in some work there very, very soon. So be ready for it.
That's so awesome, man. Wow. The beautiful, como dice Steve Stucker, the beautiful Española Valley.
That's it.
Awesome. RA County.
That's right. That's right. In fact, I have to admit, I'm a Hornet. So I want you to know, Rocky, that I'm a Hornet, not a Sun Devil. So if you're trying to figure out cuál soy, that'll tell you something, right?
Yeah.
I graduated in 1973. So that means my heart and passion is still there. So Melicia's going to start us off with the first question. So Melicia, over to you.
Well, I want to learn more about Dr. Romero. And since you guys just started con los Sun Devils and with your Hornets, well, how about them Escalante Lobos always, okay? I am class of 80, and I want to give a shout out to my alma mater in Escalante. You know, the teachers, thinking about this, the teachers back then in 80 had a lot of patience with me. So I honor every teacher in every high school for what they do. So, Dr. Romero, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you for asking. Grew up in Española, 1975 to two Hornets, as a matter of fact, Phyllis and Jesse. And you know, with that said, I really quickly saw my connection to the community and in long histories from my family, and you know, even looking at some of our you know, our lineages and those sort of things, just a long history, you know, back to 1598 and further into 1601, families arriving in Española. And at that time, we know that it was obviously Yunque at the time, right? Not what we see today in terms of Española, but just 6 miles north of Española, there in San Juan Pueblo, is where everything kind of started, and these cultures merged. And I found myself early on very much a part of the pride of being a Hispanic and being a Spaniard in the sense of the word, right, or the label that has been put out there. And then I've also now come to realize through my education and through experiences that I also have to recognize the indigenous and native culture that's definitely a part of my blood and my sangre, right? And we too often, I think, get into these positions where we're choosing one over the other. And a lot of times, I think personally, for some of us, that puts us in a conflict, interpersonal conflict that we find ourselves in, where we find maybe that we can't connect too much to our native brothers and sisters because our Spanish brothers and sisters may look at us a certain way. And I always felt that conflict because I played sports, I played baseball, was involved in a lot of activities. A lot of good friends that I still have are natives from the local area. And so I've always valued those relationships. And now in my professional life, what I've tried to do is reestablish the connection, or at least try to engage in a healing sort of approach to our Spanish and indigenous communities in northern New Mexico, because I think there's still a lot of healing that has to be done. I think that too often our clinical mind, and when we get trained in this sort of work, we tend to jump to interventions and healing and those sort of things, where there still needs to be some ceremony, there still needs to be some trust built. And you know, if I can be a conduit of that to merge our cultures and to bring more understanding to the cultures that make New Mexico so beautiful, that's what I'm hopeful that my latter parts of my career call me to do and to be involved in. And then lastly, what I'll say about my experience is my family support. I wouldn't be here without that. Even though during my upbringing, like some of you out there who are going through your own recovery or going through your own sort of journey, may have conflicts with family, or may have these you know, strifes and tension between family members. Unfortunately, the good Lord only gave us one family, and at times we have to make reconciliation with that, right? And sometimes protect ourselves from family members that may not be good for us or toxic for us or whatever the case may be, but also spend our time with family that is supportive of us and give them that recognition for our aunts and uncles, our abuelas, our abuelitos, and really recognize those family members for, as Melisha said, right? We stand on the giants that come before us and put us in these positions to now be here to meet our calling as professionals, right? Whatever that looks like for you as a peer support worker, as a clinician, as someone that may be thinking of going on for your doctorate degree or further, you know, realize and come to a point where you can accept that calling for what it is, and don't apologize for yourself when you shine in those situations, right? And you really bring some healing to the community. And I can't say enough about peer support workers. Like I said, I started off as a community health worker in a very much a peer support worker sort of role. And I value the fact that knowledge really set the tone for my professional career. Because, you know, back in the day, I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know what I wanted to be. And I'm very thankful for Dr. Jose or Joseph Vigil. And Fred, I know you know Joseph, Father Vigil now, from Pueblo, Colorado, as a father now, who I took his first intro to social welfare class, and he is the first person that ever said, hey, so to Melicia's point, he was the first person to tell me, you need to go to graduate school, you need to go on to doctoral school. And I looked at him as a you know, a kid who was still confused and not sure where I fit in the world. I looked at him like he was crazy, like, man, I'm just trying to make it through my associate's degree, you know. And he had that confidence in me before anyone else did. And he was a teacher, like Melicia said, you know, the teachers of northern New Mexico that encouraged me, that supported me, to include my family. Man, I couldn't ask for anything more in terms of the developmental stages to set me up to succeed. Now, that's not to say that there wasn't difficulties, right? That wasn't to say that we didn't experience in my family substance use and addiction and domestic violence. But we navigated through those, and we did our best as a family to survive and get through the other side of it. And here we are, you know, doing God's work, as I like to say. So I'll kind of stop there, I think.
Oh, no, please don't stop. But I just want to pick up on what you mentioned about our brothers and sisters, our Native American brothers and sisters. They're our neighbors. They're teaching us. They teach us, I think, you know, how to be more thoughtful and like, you know, inviting us into their feasts, inviting us into, we have peers, a lot of peers that are Native Americans, and we need more cultural humility so that they can tell us, because they're the expert in their ways, you know. We have the remedios, we have some good stuff, we have a lot of things that are kind of the same. But I think with the sharing, and then when you spoke about teachers, you know, it took me back because I was a difficult learner in those years of high school. And I wanted to do other things too. And I was able to, because I'm in recovery, because I'm a peer, go back and make amends to the high school that cared so much about me. And you know, and it's like folks like you and that were willing, that showed us the way. And I will call you a giant. I'll call Fred a giant, because we watch you guys do what you do in your field. And we're seeing that more peers in New Mexico want to go back to school, want to get that you know, that degree, and be the social workers, and be the LMS, you know, be our future. I loved what you said early in this thing. Nothing about us without us. We want those peers being the supervisors at the agencies where we can flourish, you know. So thank you for that awesome introduction. I think I better give it to Fred.
Ay, man, aquí estaba yo puro escuchar y escuchar, you know. I was just like, this is such a friendly reminder about not just who we are, the way that we are, but also, you know, we kind of project the hope that we have for La Raza, as I like to use that word only because one is, you know, it's a little bit more encompassing, se me parece a mí, ¿verdad? Because, yeah, you know, my DNA says I'm 38% Native American, right? So, ¿cómo te parece? You know, I think I probably have that DNA all over me, no más que la cosa es because we grew up culturally different, but we are really biologically similar. So what happens is, if I ever wonder why I get adopted by the Pueblos, is because we have a spiritual connection, right? We have a connection to the earth, and we all have these things in common because, you know, the spiritual beliefs, which are part of our cultures, remind us that those that were here before us, particularly our ancestors, and then those that were here before our ancestors, are all still here, right? All of those families are still here. It's that permanency that makes us different in New Mexico than other places, right? Because we've been here for so long. But, you know, here we are, right, in 2022, and here we are advancing and promoting and advocating for wellness, recovery, and then but what does it look like in action, verdad? So today we're going to want to learn and probe a little bit of that, what that actually looks like on the ground. Porque whether you're from Mora or from Holman or from Powaque or you're from Tierra Maria, Taos or aquí in Abiquiu or Española, Peña Blanca, all of us are all striving for much of the same thing, is the well-being for ourselves and our families and our communities. And then we get to help our communities to do that. So Dr. Romero, today we want to explore a little bit of that with you, because part of it is, you said it best, right? Is how do we help our communities do that? And it's not just seeking peace in our lives, but also healing. And so today we want to talk a little bit about a new effort underway called Ayudantes, Recursos y Apoyos. So all of that means helpers, resources, and supports. And it's about something that's happened here in New Mexico that's really recent, and it's had devastating impacts on many of our families, right? Their well-being. And you recently came on board to work with NALBA to help us look at that issue, but we're doing it collaboratively with the Human Services Department where Melissa works. And she knows very much about this effort because the peer specialists have been very actively involved in crisis counseling. And now we've notched it up to add to that clinical treatment services. So Dr. Romero, maybe you can kind of weave this together, right? The work you've done in communities, and then now this new effort. And then Melissa can certainly speak to how the peer specialists have been so critical to how do we engage with the community, because it's when we say nothing about us without us, is these are people who are in our communities and are our communities. So there's so much to say about this. So we're going to tag team on any of the questions we have. And all I could say is we have a lot of folks, and we'll give them a shout out pretty soon here, Melissa, just because we have so many folks watching today. So
Okay.
Dr. Romero, please say a little bit about this new effort and what more would be important for people to know about Ayudantes, Recursos y Apoyos.
Absolutely. Well, I think the title speaks volumes, right, in terms of us being here to support and provide resources to our community after a disaster. And if we're not here to do that for our own community members, who's going to do that, right? I think is the question that comes up a lot. And we saw, obviously, after the natural disaster, and I shouldn't say natural because we now know that it was man-made and man-caused, that it's created a lot of energy and energy in a way that has now manifested itself in anger and disappointment from, the lack of response initially. But I'm very happy to say that help is here, right? Help has been here through our peers, but now we're able to add another level of support to that infrastructure around disaster mental health response. I'm so excited. We have 6 community members who responded to the call when we put out an initial call for licensed master's level clinicians. And for me, it was a culmination, as I mentioned to Fred, and I can't thank Fred enough. Fred has always been a mentor to me and someone that I can call on and just kind of check in with and see what's the latest going on across the country and locally and more. So I definitely like to call, obviously, Fred a friend of mine and colleague, in the sense that now we work together, and it kind of led us, all these different experiences together, I think led us to a point now where we're working directly together and have kind of what Dr. Gonzalez calls our dream team, if you will, in the sense that we have a really good, solid team that is responding to this clinical need in our communities. And one of the things we see through disasters is the normal kind of grief and loss response of that Kubler-Ross talks a lot about, right? So people are right now in those anger stages, as we're seeing a lot in our community. And through this effort that we're able to start through BHSD funding and SAMHSA funding, is we're really able to put together now a crisis response that takes up the level of care to the next level, so to speak, meaning that we're now able to do some diagnosis, maybe eventually prescribing to clients if they come in with certain mental health needs and issues. We're also now able to make referrals to other community-based agencies that we've collaborated with and contracted with. I want to just recognize, the Rio Grande ATP program and also Solamente Holistic Health, who have responded to the call and provided a couple of providers that they have on their staff to be able to respond from a trauma and informed care approach to things to our community members there in Mora and San Miguel County. The 5 counties that have been identified as impacted counties are San Miguel, Mora, Sandoval, Valencia, and then of course, we also have Lincoln County, which is our Rio Doso folks. So our initial strategy was to come out, and for those of you that have maybe never been involved in kind of a start from scratch program development, you kind of have to hit the ground running, right? So what does that mean? It means that you have to leverage the relationships that you have in your community and collaboration that you have existing, right? And that's what, through the work that NALBA has already done for several years now, I was able to come in as a project director and really bring on clinicians. And if you can imagine hiring a clinical team within 40 days, given our lack of clinicians out there, is a pretty significant task to pull together. And with that support from the administrative side of NALBA, we got contracts in place in a very short time. We have an orientation next week for our clinical team. Right now, we have 2 clinicians assigned to each county, each of the 5 counties. Some cases, a clinician is taking 2 counties. And we triaged initially to identify San Miguel and Mora counties as the most impacted, with obviously Lincoln and Rio Doso and those areas obviously being very much a part of that kind of initial 60-day push of starting services. The second thing that we did, which I want to touch on briefly, is we established the relationships with our faith-based community organizations that are really, man, talk about answering the call and responding, being able to offer us some in-kind space to meet with clients in the communities, being able to allow us and invite us to be a part of their 2 committees that they have, which is the Long-Term Recovery Committee and the Emotional and Spiritual Needs Committee. So with that, we're getting firsthand information and feedback from these faith-based organizers in their own communities about what their congregation needs, right? What their community members need. And we're able to respond in a bilingual, bicultural manner to those needs. I didn't start with this, but like I said before, I feel like God put me in a place where all these experiences of being involved in the Cerro Grande fire, being involved in Hurricane Katrina, being involved in 9/11 disaster through American Red Cross, put me in a position to where I could answer the call for my home community and my home state to lead this initiative. And I think that many of you out there hold those same potentials and same skills to be able to be in a position to where when the state comes around and organizations need your help, need your support, you have that expertise because you have intimate knowledge as peers in our community. And that's what we're seeing with the work of LifeLink and our collaboration with LifeLink that is funded through FEMA to provide crisis counseling from a peer support role, is that we're now receiving, through our soft rollout of services, we're now seeing referrals come into us for people who are experiencing grief and loss, people who are experiencing exacerbation because they lost somebody during the fire and now they're kind of having to deal with all of those emotions. We met with a gentleman, and I just want to mention this real quickly, I'm just going to call him Mr. M, from out in Mora County, who came to our site where we're opening there in Cleveland, and was very thankful that we're offering services, but had said that he hasn't been able to shower or take care of his daily living needs because he doesn't have water at this point. And this gentleman is in his mid-80s, folks, right? These are our brothers and sisters, our grandpas, our grandmas, our aunts and our uncles who are impacted by this disaster. We need to respond. And I'm thankful that NALBA, given that they're not necessarily a direct service providing agency, took that call on and brought in experts and professionals to initiate this collaborative effort and response, because if not, we may be stuck still kind of treading of what are we going to do to help support people that are experiencing severe mental health response to a crisis that was caused by our government. So we have to respond. We have to be culturally sensitive. I'm very thankful we have Spanish-speaking clinicians that are going to be responding to our community needs. And with that, thank you again, Fred, for putting me in a position to be able to utilize, some of my skills and experiences to serve our clients like they should be served, right? And to be able to provide access to services like any other community member across this country should be receiving in terms of after a disaster. So with that, I'll see if there's any other follow-up to that question. Thank you, guys.
Oh my God, all I could say is, Militia, all I could say is it makes me want to jump out of my seat and drive straight up to
Yeah.
Las Vegas, because part of that
Absolutely.
is, yeah, I mean, we know that to be responsive to our families, we have to be present. And Militia, I just want to add you to this circle of
Yeah.
support here, because I remember when you were in Pecos making phone calls, connecting dots, y pa'
Yes,
acá, pa'
yes.
allá. You were right in the thick of that. And I won't forget that because it reminded me of something, and that was that we take such pride in our culture, and then we protect our ancianos, but words do not necessarily change things. And you were there in action, just as Dr. Romero is there in action, and that's the difference, ¿verdad? Hay los que hablan y hay los que hacen. So today I want to acknowledge Alicia for being part of the solution, just as Dr. Romero has described. And I want you to say something about that, because you felt it, you saw it, you were in the middle of all of that, and you still are. So, you haven't come off the scene yet, but I just want to acknowledge that because it complements what Dr. Romero said, because entre todos juntos podemos, right? That's what this, if you're wondering what this image is here, es juntos podemos. Together we can do this, and we will do this, and we will help our families, and particularly the ancianos y los que están sufriendo, right? So, Militia, I'm sure you have some questions for Dr. Romero, but please say
I
something.
just want to say, thank you for talking about that, because it's the heart work that we get to do. And I remember and I'm going to take this way back to the COVID, when Dr. Neil Bowen put that email out and said, I need some peers. We need some peers, Militia. Miss Carol Luna Anderson at the LifeLink Training Institute is still leading. We have a lead peer there. And you know what I love is that peers know when to get out of the way and allow you guys to do your work, because we can provide that one-on-one support to where we feel what they're feeling. And, on different levels of, like when the fire hit, and it was like the grandparents and the grandmas, and like that, what Dr. Rocky talked about, like we all have those, that could have been northern New Mexico, but I went to school in Vegas. I may have not finished there, but I know those people. And so when we had the team in Glorieta, those were the people that were in those rooms and knocking on those doors and getting just saying, "¿Cómo están? Let me walk you to the mess hall, to where they're feeding." There was a gentleman there too that asked one time, because I love to sing. You know that, Fred? No, I love to sing. It was Mother's Day, and we spent a couple of Mother's Day came there. I think there was another holiday. But there was a gentleman that had lost his mom, and they were going back to the funeral. And I was singing Mi Madrecita or Buenos Dias, Paloma Blanca, one of those. And he said, I want the words to that song because I'm going back to bury my mom, my mother-in-law.
Mm.
And I don't even know why that reminded me of that, Dr. Rocky, but I mean, taking time out to walk them to the place where the necessities were, the shampoo, the towels, that kind of stuff, or getting some lyrics off a phone so that they could share that song at a funeral. That's what peers do, and that's what the team was doing. The team of 44 people that went to Glorieta, that then after that are partnering with you guys, the FEMA crisis counselors, partnering and knowing when to say, this is a higher level of care. We need the clinicians. when a clinician and a peer partner together, it's magic. I'm sorry, I get emotional, but I love the fact that I know in my heart and soul that this is what we're supposed to be doing together at this time, especially on this day. And there's other stuff that comes out of those, like Dr. Aki said, disasters, but the pain gets so hard sometimes for folks that, you know, they don't see a way out. But a peer has the power to instill that hope. And you all have the power to help with the diagnosis, you know, if needed, or medication, telework, or however you guys are doing it. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts to allow a peer to be part of that process with you all. You know, yeah, it's very intense what you're doing, and the work continues. Started during COVID, then the fires, then the floods, then now, you know, not getting funding for to build a house. Like, the holidays are coming. Where are they going to cook? What, you know, what can, you know, how can we help with stuff like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent questions. I think just to echo that, you know, Melisha, I think is where we really saw the priority of unrolling these services, at least in a soft manner, this first month, 30 days, so that we, and you know, I called on our providers that are contracted with us now, and asked them, I need you guys to attend an orientation next Wednesday from 4 to 6 on Thanksgiving Eve. I need you to be attending, and I need you to be present at that, because it's imperative that we get people oriented and on board so that these holidays come in, we can be there to support people and help navigate that journey with them, right? Even though we may not be able to provide, obviously, the material things in terms of a home, we can provide the emotional support. We can connect them to different resources. There's a lot of faith-based organizations that are going to be doing a lot of really good work. And of course, there at Sala de Madrid and the old Cleveland Clinic, they're going to have the 2 sites for people to be able to access for food and clothing and other necessities that people may need during the holidays, water, obviously. And you know, I think to your point, one thing that we have to remember is that the people that typically we see were impacted, they are very rich in culture and support and community presence. On the other hand, socioeconomically, there's struggles that we have to see and support them through, right? And I think that means us really being able to help deliver services, not only that are culturally sensitive and competent, but also to be there for them for the long haul, right? We can't just come in and be there for 4 months, 5 months, and then, oh, sorry, we're gone because the fiscal year ended. Right? We have to be there to sustain this healing, because the healing, as we know, through disasters, and if you do any kind of research in disaster mental health work, some of these symptoms are coming up a year, 2 years after the disaster, post-disaster. And when we look at northern New Mexico with suicidality, substance use issues, alcohol issues that we see that are pervasive in some of our communities, we also see that COVID and this fire really exacerbated those issues for some people, right? Some people started drinking maybe a little bit more than they were. Some people started self-soothing and coping with other medications and other things. So there's many layers to this that I don't think are all uncovered just yet. And I think for you all out there that are advocates, that are peers, you need to reach out to your local senators and representatives and to the governor and make sure that you advocate for sustainable recovery efforts, right? Sustainable clinical support services that are going to be here for the long haul and support people until they don't need that support any longer. And I think that's the last piece that I'll mention. You know, we're doing an environmental scan that we're coordinating through Dr. Moore and some other folks that is really going to also help us to give agencies that are going to long-term serve these communities some ideas in terms of maybe gaps that they may not have seen in their services, that if we ever run into a disaster like this again, we're better prepared and we're able to respond like we should have responded in the first place.
Yes.
Yeah, very, very well said, Dr. Romero. And you know, I would be remiss. What's a fancy word? I would be remiss. En otra palabra se me pasó. If I did at least ask if you could repeat the contact number for
Oh yeah.
Ayudantes Soci Apoyos so that we can get it on live Facebook and so that people can know that this is a number where they can call, where it's a safe place, it's a confidential place. It's a place where you get to talk to somebody who will sound just like you and probably looks just like you, but is trained, is licensed, it's a clinician. Porque aquí estamos para servir, ¿verdad? We're here to be of service. Our careers are a reflection of that. This isn't a band-aid for us. This is our life's work. Porque if you ever want to motivate me, you just have to show me someone who's suffering. And I can assure you, you know, in my years past, when I was the mental health director in Colfax County and Santa Fe County, I have been in the trenches. So ya yo sé cómo escardar, yo sé cómo hacer los adobes, yo sé cómo hacer el trabajo of helping and serving people who are suffering. But today, if you could just share the phone number with us a couple of times, and we'll also do it before the end of today's Plática, because this has been very motivating for me and Comadrecita Milicia. God, we have so many people on Facebook commenting and saying something. Do a shout out to the people who have been calling in, making comments, because all I could say is we need to acknowledge the people who took the time to be with us today during their lunch hour. They gave of their time. We want to say thank you to you. Mil gracias. But Milicia, please, you know, let's acknowledge the people who are listening in because they represent who we're here to serve. So if you don't mind doing that.
Yes, sir. I will tell you that on this end, Francis Duran is here. Wow. Dice La Francis, you are all beautiful and caring, a caring dream team. Caring for our elders, our viejitos from Las Vegas, Nuevo Mexico. We're lucky to know these resources are here to help everyone impacted with this disaster. Gracias a Dios, los bendiga siempre. Fran Martinez, thank you for your efforts in supporting communities. Let me see, those two are on my end. Fred, did I miss any? Because I miss anyone.
We have a bunch of folks. I want to give a shout out to Martin Rodriguez, and he's calling in from Texas, but he worked in New Mexico. He's a licensed clinician, so that says something about Martin. Hello, Martin, by the way. Julie Penfound Dryfault, I hope I pronounced your name. She's calling in from Smart, Colorado. And what does that say, right? Laura Narmijo, thank you for joining us today. And as you already mentioned, Francis Duran and Fran Martinez Romero. Linda Grisham, thank you for joining us. She's in Santa Fe, and she's a great supporter of NALBA. In fact, Linda, I hope to see you at Mariachi Christmas, by the way. But anyway, that was a little plug for Mariachi Christmas. But anyway, yeah, these are folks who have taken time to share some of their comments and insights. And so with the remaining time, there's a couple of things we can do. You know, it always excites me to work with people who are doers, los que hacen, no nomás los que hablan, pero los que hacen. I tend to differentiate things that way, right? Just happens to be that's kind of how I think of things. Is whatever you say, the proof is in the pudding, es lo que haces. And, you know, that's what I like about what's happening in this particular program. But there's something that I think is in store, and maybe the three of us could start to think about this, because I know you both have thought about this, and that is, how do we look at being able to support our communities through things such as suicide prevention that's relative to New Mexico, pertenece a los Nuevo Mexicanos, because we all have lost a loved one, a dear one. The first suicide experience that I encountered was my best friend in high school. We both went to college, and I never realized when he showed me a gun that he bought, what he had planned to do with it. It didn't even cross my mind. A week after he showed me that gun, he took his own life and shot his wife, who survived that. And my life changed because of that situation. At the same time, as my life had changed when my sister was diagnosed with chronic paranoid schizophrenia. This stuff is part of our lives, ¿verdad? We don't hide it. We don't shy from it. And the reason we don't, and particularly my family, is because ahí está. ¿Qué vamos a hacer? Right? And the things that we did as a family and a natural support is what helps us deal and cope with situations like this. But I want to get your thoughts, both of your thoughts about what we might be starting to think about doing to be of service to Nuevo Mexicanos across the state in relationship to suicide prevention. And then we have to, like, I don't think we're going to end this show. This might need a part 2, Melisha. I think this might need a part 2, se me parece a mí. Because, it's like a TV series, right? We get you at a cliffhanger, ahí te tenemos ahí, and then all of a sudden it says, well, tune in next week. Well, we might just have to tune in next month or sometime this year. But I want to get your thoughts about that, Dr. Romero, and then Melisha, and then we'll ask Melisha to help us with the final takeaway, okay? So.
All right. Yes, thank you, Fred, for asking that question. To make sure I give the number again, it's 505-690-0286. And again, I'll say that one more time. It's 505-690-0286. And we're able to take referrals, self-referrals. So if any of you are out there listening and you need some support and you're in the impacted counties, and I think the other piece to add to that is if you know someone or you want to pass on that information, please do so. The peers over at LifeLink that are out for FEMA, that are doing some of this crisis counseling work, are still in our communities, are still out there. So if you need to reach out to them, and I want to add that we've really developed a reciprocal also referral process with the peers. So if we as clinicians come across somebody that isn't ready for clinical stuff yet, and they want more support from a peer, we can refer them to them as well. So with suicide prevention, as you all know, disasters sometimes exacerbate these issues, and we have to be very cautious and pay attention currently, because already New Mexico and northern New Mexico is on the higher ends of data that shows a high propensity for suicide or people taking their life by suicide. I recently did a talk out in, actually it was out in Las Vegas for NALBA's conference, and I dedicated it to Roman, a community member out in Chama that I know Melisha knows really well. But I think we have to also start putting names to these people from our community that can serve as beacons of hope for us to say, hey, we need to do more. Unfortunately for Roman, we may be responding too late in that case, but he can serve as a way for us to generate more rural access to services, rural education around suicidality. Discussions with our agricultural communities, right, where usually the machismo factor is very alive and well. We don't reach out for help, we don't ask for help. But in Roman's case, potentially, when a family loses a young male that potentially may take on the business down the road, or maybe somebody who's in line to support the family business, they lose that generation of a family member, it impacts that family and community maybe more so than it would in a huge metropolitan area, right? In terms of just the people that are present in that community or no longer present. So one initiative I want to mention, Fred, real quickly is, I'm writing a proposal. We're very thankful that Secretary Katrina Holtram Lopez has agreed to support as a state agency, but it's through Department of Health. Now they have some violence prevention monies that and I'm sure some of you have seen the announcement, it's out there. They're accepting proposals. So we're submitting a proposal that connects our elders and our young people back together through a prevention education program, and then we leverage those peers from an elder kind of level and a young person kind of level to then go out and train our communities on this model of suicide prevention. So one, we're not only modeling this connection between our generations but we're also sending them out to then go train communities and model that for their community. And I think, you know, with the work that we've done for AFSP for the Latino specific curriculum, Hispanic Latino focus, I think that's going to be the curriculum that we identified to select to then go out and spread to northern New Mexico and train people on this curriculum. And we're hopeful that in year one for our proposal, we at least get funding to test pilot in at least 1 or 2 counties with the intention of sustainability for the next several years, and hopefully getting the state to fund that initiative for several years in terms of, you know, best practice approaches to suicide prevention. So with that said, you know, our lives, we're survivors of suicide. My kiddo's dad took his life by suicide, and we've continued to deal with that as a family. 10 years later, we're still managing those experiences for our kids. And even through my wife's own experiences and my experience of dealing with that, grieving for my children for the loss of their father, right? A different sort of kind of angle when we talk about the impact on its extended family as well. So with that, I'll go ahead and stop. Melisha, I know you have something to add about that piece, and I know you and I have talked before about it.
Absolutely, sir. Thank you. And thank you for acknowledging, and thank you for honoring Roman. And, you know, today, it was really weird, but today, something told me that I needed to put something out there. And not just because we just recently lost Roman. I mean, he was a young man destined to do great things, right? And so, you know, being a neighbor of this young man's parents forever, you know, I go back home and they're like you could throw a rock to where they live, you know, from where my parents live. Also, me being a survivor of an attempted, you know, brought back memories. And it can be healing to say their name out loud. And you just did that for me today, you know, and made it okay for myself, for Roman's family, I'm sure. And, you know, also a nephew of mine when he was 13, you know, coming up on something like that, you know, it just breaks a community. I heard you speak about, you know, in a big metropolitan area, not very many, you know, like it doesn't get out so much. But when you're from rural New Mexico or southern New Mexico in those little towns or any little pueblito, you know, when that happens, everybody's devastated for years. And it's like the ripple effect, you know. I will never forget my Ricky. And you made it okay. Ricky, I love you. That was my tia's son, my first cousin. And he, you know, and Roman, and just all the names I can, you know, we can, that are in our hearts right now that we just want to say. It's okay, you know, because we hold the parents and the families and the abuelitos and the abuelas in our hearts, and we pray, you know, because as a community, we come together when something like that happens. And thank you for bringing that to light. And just like we talk about our folks that, you know, that lose their lives to overdose, and more so now with fentanyl, it's okay because we go in different ways. And I just, you know, it's healthy to talk about that because our mental health and the family's mental health is at stake. So I don't know how to clinically say or say anything about that, but I do know what lives in here. And if we don't take care of what's going on in here, that we can't give and we can't make it okay. So that's amazing that you honored that. So I thank you. And this work needs to continue for sure.
Yeah, Tyler, it's just Melisha, como siempre, thank you for always feeling out the experience that we're talking about. Porque I think we all feel it. It's just that some get to express it because they practice it and they get to do it. And you role model for us. Que it actually helps us when we say it and speak it out. Porque nos despedimos del dolor, ¿verdad? And es la despedida de lo que estamos sintiendo y pensando que nos ayuda. So the fact that you're expressing that is a way of, in fact, healing, and that's part of the healing process. So muchísimas gracias, comadrecita, for always doing that, because it connects us, right, in that way. And that's what this plática is always about, is our spiritual beliefs, our beliefs in humanity, why it is that we try to help those amongst us, verdad, que están sufriendo. And Dr. Romero, thank you for always reminding us it's also not just about knowing the issues, but doing something about them. And so I want us to kind of wrap up a little bit, because in some measures, I think this is going to need a part two. So Dr. Romero, I guess if Melicia's okay with this, we will make this an invitation for another plática down the way, and especially
Thank
so we
you.
can let people know what the progress we're doing with ayudantes de recursos y apoyos, because it's great. So we did get the phone number up on live on Facebook, so we'll put that up there before the show wraps up. And just in closing, there's a couple of things. We did get an item in Spanish in the inside of the chat box, and I'd like to share that with folks. And then I'll say a little bit about that, both in Spanish and English, because this is a bilingual program, right? In other words, si hay gente que habla en español, if there are people who speak in Spanish, we want to acknowledge that. Queremos conocer que los que hablan en español, aquí tienes lugar. If you speak in Spanish, you have a place here. And so Fadwa Elizabeth Farhat, and I hope I pronounced your last name correctly, but this is what she says. Tienen programas donde trabajan con promotoras en preparación de emergencias. Las promotoras para la comunidad es muy importante. Es el primer paso para que la comunidad se acerque a las organizaciones del gobierno a pedir ayuda sin miedo. So she's asking if we have any programs related to promotoras who then can work in addressing emergencies, local emergencies. And she said that the promotoras, what we commonly also refer to community health workers, are important because they're oftentimes the first person who, in fact, is addressing these issues at the community level, and particularly in relationship to local government agencies. When people come seeking help, of which oftentimes they're afraid. And the answer is, in our organization, we have something called Promotoras de Bienestar. And that particular training program is intended precisely for the communities, for people who are not licensed, for grandparents, Head Starts, faith leaders, peer specialists, and promotoras. The whole idea is, how do we educate our community around concepts that are related to substance abuse and mental health? And then secondly, can be done in English or Spanish. And then more importantly is non-stigmatizing. So we're using the word bienestar, well-being. So what we're doing is not trying to already put a label on people, but talk about how do we restore our well-being as human beings. And it's a whole health, whole person training program that we do. So Vadua, please look us up. We'll make sure we put our Facebook page here and our website information on the Facebook chat. So I think with the time we have left, Rocky, what's the one takeaway you want to leave with us for today? And with that, that'll help us close for today's show. But what's the one item you want to have our Facebook audience take away from today's presentation?
Yeah, I guess would have to refer to President Obama behind me, right? Is that we should be instillers of hope. Is that we as providers, as community health workers, we can lend our community members a vision of hope until they can create a vision for themselves. And I think a lot of time it's through modeling, it's through creating a hopeful message, it's through just being there to be empathetic and to support people. And if you can just sit with somebody and have a cup of coffee, have some plática with them, like we're modeling for you all here, right? That can be a really good opportunity. And then lastly, some of the work I'm doing more recently is focused on machismo. So the males out there, there's nothing wrong with reaching out for help and support when you need it. There's nothing wrong with asking for help and support from family, from your wife, from your loved ones. There's nothing wrong with asking and reaching out to a clinician or calling our crisis line that we just got out there, and we'll connect you with somebody that can help support you in that. So there's no shame in reaching out for help and showing your emotions and crying when you need to cry. So I hope that I can also be a model of that as a male in this culture and in this community for folks moving forward. Thank you, Melisha. Thank you, Fred. As always, I get goosebumps and just filled with pride to be able to be a part of this. I look forward to future talks as well. Thank you so much.
Well, muchísimas gracias, Rocky. And I know that you do like us to call you Rocky, but we shall never neglect the fact that you worked so hard to be credentialed as a doctor. And so,
Thank you.
Dr. Romero, we honor you, your service to your community, your love and passion, and you're keeping the culture and the traditions alive. And I'm going to make one comment, and then of course Alicia's going to close us up. So Mariachi Christmas, December 2nd, in Santa Fe at the Lenzic Performing Arts Center. We raise scholarship funds for Latino students going to college to pursue a degree in behavioral health. When we talk about what are our solutions, NALBA works to help ensure that we can get more clinicians in communities who are bilingual, bicultural, that are trained to become licensed to serve our communities. Support our scholarship program by attending Mariachi Christmas. This year's show is phenomenal. All I can say is you got to come, and come before the tickets sell out. Melisha, you'll wrap us up. And again, as always, all we can say is we just take such honor in working with you and our compadrecito who didn't get to join us today, Nathan. That is saludos. But thank you, Melisha, as always, for your heart, your soul, your compassion, and your work.
Thank you. Thank you, Fred, Dr. Rocky. Thank you. I'm looking at the same word. Hold on, pain ends, hope, and peer support workers are hope dealers, not dope dealers. So you know what I mean? We are here to also support. Call the OPRI office if you feel like you it's in your heart and you're on fire for peer support work and you qualify and meet our criteria. Call us at 505-470-3311. We're here to help you get on the road to your in the workforce and also back into school if that's how you want to do it. And because we need more social workers, we need more giants. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Adios.